The silence in the grand chamber of the High Synod was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a crushing atmospheric pressure that pressed against the gilded chitin of the assembled delegates, reminding them of the gravity of their station and the burden of their history. The hall itself was a testament to the aesthetic of the Ethelgardian supremacy, a vast, cavernous expanse carved from the heart of a single, moon-sized geode, the walls shimmering with the violet and obsidian fractals of raw amethyst and void stone, reflecting the cold, distant light of the nebula outside the viewing occlusion fields. There were no chairs, for the High Lords did not sit. They hovered on anti-gravitic podiums, arranged in concentric circles that spiraled upward toward the apex of the chamber where the Grand Justicar floated, his form shrouded in the ceremonial robes of woven starlight and shadows. The air smelled of ozone and ancient dust, recycled through filtration systems that had been scrubbing the atmosphere of this station for millennia, preserving the sterility that the Ethelgard valued above all else. It was here, in this frozen monument to order and bureaucracy, that the fate of species was decided, where civilizations were measured against the rigid geometric standards of the supremacy and found wanting. And it was here, exactly 100 cycles of the great star ago, that the decision had been made regarding the species known as humanity, a decision that was now, against all protocol and precedent, being revisited. High Arbiter Calith felt the tremors of uneasiness rippling through his synaptic fluid as he adjusted the sensory dampeners on his cowl. He was old, even by the standards of his long-lived race, his carapace scarred by the etched markings of 1,000 judicial campaigns, but the memory of the human exile remained vivid, a jagged shard of recollection in the smooth glass of his memory. He remembered the humans not as warriors, for they had been technologically inferior, nor as diplomats, for they had been crude and passionate, but as a chaotic variable, a species that refused to conform to the predictable algorithms of the galactic equation. They had been noisy, expansive, consuming resources with a voracious appetite that the Synod deemed cancerous. They had not attacked the supremacy. They had simply existed too loudly, pushing boundaries, questioning the immutable laws of the caste systems, and breeding with a speed that terrified the slow, methodical elders of the council. And so the sentence had been passed. Not extinction. The Ethelgard considered themselves too civilized for genocide, but exile. Absolute, irrevocable banishment to the system of Xylos, a graveyard of a solar system on the fringes of the known chart, where the central star was a dying red giant, and the only habitable planet, Xylos Prime, was a radioactive husk of ash and silica, stripped of its atmosphere by solar winds eons ago. It was a death sentence disguised as mercy, a place where the humans would inevitably turn upon one another for the last scraps of oxygen and water until the silence reclaimed them. The agenda is set. The voice of Grand Justicar Malash boomed, not through the air, but directly into the auditory cortex of every delegate, a psionic broadcast that demanded total submission. The cycle of review is upon us. By the ancient statutes of the Concordat, we are obligated to confirm the status of all exiled populations. We must verify the cessation of the human anomaly. The Justicar's podium drifted lower, descending into the center of the ring, his many-eyed visage scanning the assembly with a gaze that felt like cold scanning lasers. It is a formality, a waste of fuel and time, but the law is the law. We shall dispatch a surveyor fleet to Xylos Prime to document the remains. We shall catalog their failure as a lesson to other aspiring primitives who dare to reject the order. A murmur of assent rippled through the chamber, a sound like dry leaves skittering over stone. To the Ethelgard, the outcome was not in doubt. Xylos Prime was a tomb. No biological organism above the complexity of a lichen could survive there for a week, let alone a century. The radiation storms alone would boil the blood of a soft-skinned mammal. The lack of water, the toxic soil, the crushing gravity, it was a planet designed by the universe to kill. The humans had been sent there with nothing but the ships they arrived in and the supplies in their holds. It was a mathematical certainty that they were dead. And yet, Calith felt a strange vibration in his antenna, a premonition that defied logic. He raised a manipulator arm, signaling for the floor. The movement was slight, but in the stillness of the Synod it was like a shout. The Justicar turned his gaze toward Calith. "High Arbiter Calith," Malash intoned, his mental voice dripping with patronizing patience. "You have a query regarding the documentation of the extinct." "I have a query regarding the nature of the mission, Justicar," Calith replied, his own voice projecting calmly, though his internal hearts were beating out of sync. We assume extinction, we assume silence, but the humans, they were resourceful. Illogical, yes, chaotic, certainly. But they possessed a trait we often purge from our own: desperation. If we send a surveyor fleet, we must be prepared for the possibility that the documentation may require interaction. A ripple of amusement, cold and sharp, moved through the council. Several delegates made the clicking sounds that denoted mockery. Interaction? Molosh scoffed, the sound echoing psionically. With dust, with bleached bones, you give the primitives too much credit, Arbiter. Xylos Prime is a world where even machines decay. We sent them to the hell of the sector. Do you imagine they have built a paradise in the inferno? We go to scan ruins, nothing more, but if it eases your senescent anxiety, you shall lead the fleet. You shall be the first to set foot on the grave of humanity and certify their demise. The command was a punishment, a dismissal disguised as an honor. To leave the capital, to travel to the rim, to walk on a dead world, it was beneath the dignity of a high arbiter. But Calith bowed his head, accepting the burden. He knew with a certainty he could not explain that the Justicar was wrong. The universe was vast and cold, but life, stubborn, virulent, terrified life, had a way of clinging to the precipice. He remembered the eyes of the human ambassador when the sentence was read 100 years ago. There had been no tears, no begging, only a cold, hard look that seemed to measure the Synod and find them wanting. The human had said one thing before being dragged away: "We will endure." The journey to the Xylos system took weeks of superluminal travel, a passage through the non-space between stars where the laws of physics bent and wept. The Ethel Guardian fleet was a thing of terrifying beauty, a procession of needle-thin dreadnoughts and spherical science vessels, their hulls composed of living metal that repaired itself and shimmered with bioluminescence. Calith stood on the bridge of the flagship, the silent judgment, watching the swirling vortex of the slipstream through the main viewport. The crew around him moved with the silent efficiency of a hive mind, their actions coordinated by the ship's central AI. There was no chatter, no camaraderie, only duty. They were the pinnacle of evolution, or so they told themselves. They had conquered hunger, disease, and descent. They had traded passion for stability and art for geometry. As the fleet began the deceleration sequence, dropping out of slipstream at the edge of the Xylos system, Calith felt the tension return. The navigation officers were already scanning the telemetry, their fingers dancing over holographic interfaces. "Entering real space in 3, 2, 1, the helmsman announced. The swirling gray of the slipstream vanished, replaced by the stark, star-speckled blackness of the void, and there, looming in the distance, was the Xylos star. It should have been a dim, angry red eye, casting a pallid light over the system. Instead, the viewscreen adjusted, filtering the intensity. The star was there, but it was stabilized. The violent solar flares that had characterized the dying giant were absent. A ring of massive structures, barely visible at this distance but unmistakably artificial, orbited the star's equator, siphoning off excess plasma and regulating the fusion output. "Sensor anomaly," the tactical officer stated, his voice devoid of emotion but laced with hesitation. "Stellar output is within Class G parameters. This is impossible. Historical data indicates a volatile Class M variable." "Recalibrate sensors," Calith ordered, stepping closer to the screen. "The data is correct. Someone has caged the star." "Impossible," the science officer interjected. "The energy requirements for stellar regulation on this scale exceed the theoretical limits of our own engineering. Who could have done this?" Calith did not answer. He knew. The fleet moved inward, engines burning with silent blue fire passing the outer gas giants. They, too, showed signs of tampering. Massive orbital refineries hung in the clouds of the Jovian worlds, harvesting helium-3 and hydrogen with an efficiency that made the Ethelgard's mining operations look like children scratching in the dirt. But it was the destination, Xylos Prime, that held the true answer. As they approached the third planet, the one that should have been a gray, cratered wasteland, the bridge crew fell into a stunned silence. The planet was blue. Not the pale, sickly blue of an ice world, but the deep, vibrant azure of deep oceans and oxygen-rich atmosphere. Swirls of white clouds danced in cyclonic patterns, indicating a complex and active weather system. Green continents sprawled across the surface, vast track. TS of vegetation that defied the radioactive history of the world. And lights, millions upon millions of lights, glittered on the night side, forming geometric webs of civilization that spanned the globe. It was not a graveyard, it was a jewel. "Shields up," the tactical officer barked, panic finally cracking his conditioning. Multiple energy signatures detected. High magnitude, they are targeting us. Hold fire, Kaleth commanded, his voice whipping across the bridge like a lash. Do not engage. We are here as observers. Raise the diplomatic standard. Open all hailing frequencies. They are hailing us, Arbiter, the communications officer said. Audio and visual, it is archaic, wideband transmission. Put it on screen. The main holographic viewer flickered, resolving into an image that caused the breath to catch in Kaleth's throat. It was a human, but not the ragged, desperate creatures he remembered. The figure on the screen was an older male, sitting in a room that appeared to be made of polished wood and glass, with a view of a lush, rain-slicked forest behind him. He wore a simple tunic of gray fabric, functional and unadorned. His face was lined, his hair white, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and unsettlingly calm. This is Chancellor Elias Thorn of the Terran Reclamation Authority, the human said. His voice was deep, resonating with a gravity that seemed to bypass the translation matrix and speak directly to the listener's core. We have been expecting you, High Arbiter. The timing of the Synod is impeccable, as always. You are exactly on schedule. Kaleth stepped into the pickup field, straightening his posture. I am High Arbiter Kaleth of the Ethel Guardian Supremacy. We have come to verify the status of the penal colony. A faint smile touched Thorn's lips. It was not a smile of malice, but of pity. Penal colony, is that what you still call it? We call it home. You are welcome to land, Arbiter. We have prepared a landing spire for your flagship at the capital, Novus Eterna. Please instruct your fleet to maintain orbit. Our planetary defense grid is sensitive to large formations. We would not want an accident. The threat was veiled, wrapped in politeness, but it was undeniable. The sensors were screaming now, detecting gravitational anomalies on the planet's surface that suggested weaponry capable of cracking a moon. Kaleth realized with a cold dawn of horror that the Ethelgard had not just underestimated the humans, they had provided them with the perfect crucible. We accept your invitation, Kaleth said. The descent to the surface was a journey through a miracle. The atmosphere was thick and rich, smelling of rain and chlorophyll as the Silent Judgment's intake vents cycled the local air. They flew over oceans that teemed with bioengineered leviathans, cleaning the water and balancing the pH levels. They passed over forests where the trees grew hundreds of meters tall, their canopies interlocking to form a radiation shield that absorbed the remnants of the star's hostility. And then, the city. Novus Eterna was not built on the land, it was grown from it. The buildings were spires of crystallized carbon and biologically silicate structures that spiraled up toward the sky like great white roots seeking the sun. There were no harsh angles, no industrial smog. It was a synthesis of technology and biology that the Ethelgard had theorized but never achieved. The flagship docked at a high spire, and Kaleth, accompanied by a guard of honor that felt woefully inadequate, descended the ramp. The air on the platform was cool and crisp. Chancellor Thorn waited for them, flanked not by soldiers but by scientists and children. The children were playing a game with floating spheres of light, ignoring the massive alien warship as if it were a common occurrence. This, more than the weapons, unsettled Kaleth. Where was the fear? Welcome to Xylos, Thorn said, extending a hand, a primitive gesture but one Kaleth understood. He did not take it, bowing formally instead. This transformation, Kaleth gestured to the horizon where a double rainbow arched over a glittering sea. It is technically impossible. The radiation levels alone should have sterilized all organic matter within days of your arrival. The soil was toxic. The atmosphere was vacuum. How? Thorn motioned for them to follow. They walked along a wide promenade that overlooked the city. When you dropped us here, you gave us a choice, Thorn explained, his pace leisurely. Die or change. You assumed we would try to terraform the planet to match us, to build domes, to hide in caves, to recreate Earth. But Earth was gone, and we didn't have the time or the resources to fight the planet. He stopped and looked at a flower growing in a planter. It was a vibrant purple with thorns that looked like metallic needles. He touched it gently, and the petals closed around his finger, pulsating. So we didn't change the PL. And it to suit us. We changed ourselves to suit the planet, and then together we changed everything. Kaleth stopped, his heart's pounding. Genetic modification? Illegal, immoral under the Concordat laws. Survival has its own morality, Thorn said softly. We unlocked the dormant parts of our genome. We spliced our DNA with the extremophiles found in the deep crust. We became harder, more resilient. We learned to eat the toxic silicates and filter the radiation. And as we changed, we understood the planet, It wasn't dead, Arbiter. It was dormant. It was waiting for a symbiotic partner. You saw a rock. We saw a shell. They reached a large lift that took them down deep into the spire. But that is not all, Kalith insisted. The star. You stabilized a red giant. That requires energy manipulation on a scale of a Type II civilization. You were Type 0.7 when we exiled you. Necessity is the mother of invention, Thorn quoted. But you are right. We had help, not from aliens, not from gods, from the planet itself. The lift doors opened, revealing a vast underground chamber. It was a laboratory, but it looked more like a cathedral. In the center, suspended in a magnetic containment field, was a shard of crystal the size of a mountain. It pulsed with a rhythmic golden light. Cables and neural uplinks ran from it into banks of machinery manned by humans who looked different. Their skin had a metallic sheen. Their eyes glowed with internal light. They were interfacing directly with the crystal. "What is this?" Kalith whispered, sensing a power that made his cowl vibrate. "We call it the Heart of Xylos," Thorn said. "When we started digging for shelter, we found it. This planet wasn't formed naturally. It is an artifact, a construct left behind by a civilization that vanished before your Concordat even learned to light a fire. It's a geoforming engine, a planetary computer, but it was broken. It needed a biological component to complete the circuit. It needed a mind, a human mind." Kalith stared at the humans connected to the machine. You enslaved your people to a machine." "No," Thorn said, his voice hardening. "They are volunteers. They are the conductors. They guide the planetary systems. They regulate the magnetic field. They speak to the star. It is a burden, yes, but it is the price of paradise. We realized that to survive, we had to stop being individuals fighting for scraps and become a collective working for the whole. You exiled us because you thought we were chaotic. You were right. But you forgot that chaos is the engine of evolution. Order is stagnation. You have been stagnant for 1,000 years, Arbiter. We have evolved 1,000,000 years in a century." The realization hit Kalith like a physical blow. The Ethelgard had spent millennia perfecting their bureaucracy, their rigid caste systems, their static art. They had stopped growing. They were a crystal, beautiful but brittle. The humans were a vine, aggressive, adaptable, breaking stone to reach the sun. "Why?" Kalith asked, his voice trembling. "You have this power. You could have left. You could have come back to the core worlds. You could have taken your revenge. You could have destroyed the Synod." Thorn turned to face him, and for the first time the human looked tired. The weight of a century of struggle was etched into his face. "Revenge? We don't have time for revenge. We have been busy, and besides, we have been listening." "Listening to what?" "To the dark," Thorn said. He walked over to a console and keyed in a command. A holographic map of the galaxy appeared. It showed the Ethelgard territory, a small, bright cluster in the spiral arm. But then the view zoomed out, far out, into the intergalactic void. "The Heart of Xylos isn't just a terraformer," Thorn explained. "It's a sensor array, a listening post. The ancients who built this planet, who disguised it as a dead rock, they were hiding, they were watching. And now so are we." On the map, a red shadow was encroaching from the edge of the screen. It was not a fleet. It was a void. A massive, consuming nothingness that was eating stars. It was moving toward the galaxy, toward the Ethelgard. "We didn't come back to kill you," Thorn said quietly. "We stayed here to build a fortress. We turned this system into a weapon not against you but for you. Because that," he pointed to the encroaching shadow, "is coming, the great silence. It consumed the ancients. It is coming for us all." Kalith stared at the map. The political squabbles of the Synod, the arrogance of Malash, the fear of human unruliness. It all seemed suddenly microscopic. The Ethelgard had been bickering over crumbs while a tidal wave approached. "You knew," Kalith whispered. "You knew this was coming and you still let us judge you. You let us mock you." "We didn't know then," Thorn admitted. "We learned, and we realized that if we tried to warn you, you wouldn't listen. You would have debated it in committee for 100 years. You would have sent a probe that would have been eaten. You are too slow, Arbiter. Your order makes you slow. We needed to be fast. We needed to be ruthless. So we built. We thrived. We prepared." "What is it?" Kalith asked, looking at the shadow. "A swarm," Thorn said. "A biological imperative to consume. It doesn't hate, it just feeds. It will be here in less than a decade." Kalith looked at the human. He saw the strength in the fragile frame, the terrifying adaptability that had allowed them to turn a hellscape into a garden and a prison into a bastion. He realized then that the human anomaly was not a defect. It was the galaxy's immune system. "What do we do?" Kalith asked, the words slipping out before he could check them. He He was a high arbiter of the supremacy, asking an exile for guidance. The hierarchy had collapsed in a single conversation. Thorn smiled, and this time it was a genuine, warm smile. I like that word. First you tell your fleet to stand down, then you tell your Justicar to stop talking and start listening. We have the technology to shield your worlds, but we need your industrial capacity to build the emitters. We have the strategy, but we need your fleets to form the line. We need each other. You have order, we have chaos. Separately, we die. Together, we might just live. The High Arbiter looked at the map, then at the thriving city above, and finally at the humans standing before him. He thought of the Justicar's arrogance, the sterile halls of the Synod, the dead weight of tradition. Then he thought of the green forests of Xylos, the impossible blue sky, and the needle-thorned flower that had closed around the human-s finger not to hurt, but to connect. "I will speak to the Synod," Calith said, his voice firming. "They will not want to listen, they will call it a trick, they will call you monsters." "Let them," Thorn said. "We are used to being called names, just make sure they send the ships." The journey back to the surface was silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of the Synod. It was the silence of a deep breath before a plunge. Calith boarded his ship, his mind racing with the diplomatic war he was about to wage, a war harder than any he had presided over in court. As the silent judgment broke orbit, he looked back at Xylos Prime. It shone in the darkness, a beacon of defiance, a testament to the indomitable will of a species that refused to accept the end. The humans had been exiled to a dead planet. They had been given a grave. Instead, they had built a fortress. And now, the wardens would have to beg the prisoners for salvation. Calith opened a channel to the fleet. "Set course for the homeworld, maximum speed, and get me a secure line to the High Justicar. I have a judgment to deliver." The return to the Ethel Guardian capital was a blur of frantic preparation for Calith. He spent the weeks in Slipstream compiling the data, the sensor logs, the undeniable proof of the encroaching dark and the miracle of Xylos. He drafted arguments, simulated counterarguments, and prepared for the inevitable charge of treason that Malash would level against him. But beneath the anxiety, there was a new feeling. Hope. A strange, chaotic, human emotion that felt like a fire in his chest. When the silent judgment docked at the Synod station, the reception was icy. There were no honor guards, only armed sentinels. Calith was escorted directly to the Grand Chamber. The atmosphere was even heavier than before. The news of the anomaly had leaked, and the High Lords were buzzing with a mixture of fear and indignation. Malash sat on his high podium, his eyes narrowing as Calith floated into the center of the ring. "You return early, Arbiter," Malash hissed. "And you bring disturbing rumors. We authorized a scan. We did not authorize fraternization." "I bring more than rumors, Justicar," Calith announced, his voice amplified by his own command overrides. "I bring the truth. The humans are not dead. They have surpassed us." A roar of outrage erupted from the assembly. Malash slammed his scepter down, a psionic blast of silence washing over the crowd. "Heresy, to suggest that the exiles, filthy, short-lived primitives, could surpass the Ethel Guard is madness. You have been compromised, Calith. Did they infect you? Did they use their biological trickery to cloud your mind?" "They used logic," Calith retorted, projecting the holographic map of the Dark Swarm into the center of the room. The massive image filled the chamber, casting a red pallor over the delegates. "Look, while we debated the curvature of our architecture and the purity of our bloodlines, a predator has been stalking us. The humans found it. They prepared for it. They turned their prison into a shield for us." "Lies," Malash screamed, losing his composure. "A fabrication, a trick to lure us into an ambush, the H. Humans are vindictive. They hate us for the exile. They want to destroy us." "If they wanted to destroy us, I would be dead," Calith said calmly. "My fleet would be space dust. Their planetary defenses could have vaporized us before we achieved orbit. They invited us down. They showed us the threat. They offered an alliance." "An alliance?" A delegate from the military caste floated forward, his carapace bristling. "With the exiles, it is against the natural law. They are chaotic, unclean." "They are alive," Calith shouted, breaking the decorum of the court for the first time in his life. "And we will not be if we do not listen. The swarm is coming. It does not care about our laws. It does not care about our caste system. It eats biomass, and we are the ripest feast in the sector." He pressed a button on his podium, playing the recording of Thorn. The human's face appeared, giant and weary, looking down at the High Lords. "Leaders of the Ethel Guard," Thorn's recorded voice boomed. I know you despise us, I know you fear us, that is irrelevant. The universe is burning at the edges. We have the water, you have the bucket. You can either help us put out the fire, or you can burn with your pride. The choice is yours. We will fight with or without you. But we would rather fight with you. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of fear. The High Lords looked at the map, then at Malash, then at each other. The dogma of the supremacy was strong, but the instinct for self-preservation was stronger. Malash trembled with rage. I will not submit to this. Blackmail. I will send the Grand Fleet. We will scour Xylos from the sky. We will take their technology and use it ourselves. We do not need the humans. You cannot take it, Kalith said softly. The technology is biological. It is keyed to their genome. It is symbiotic. You kill them, the planet dies. The defenses fail. The heart of Xylos stops beating, and then the swarm takes us all. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the younger delegates, the ones who had not been part of the decision to exile the humans, the ones who had quietly questioned the stagnation of the supremacy. I call for a vote of confidence, Kalith declared, invoking the oldest and most dangerous right of the Synod. I challenge the judgment of the Grand Justicar. I propose a new course, the Act of Unification. We end the exile. We recognize the Terran Reclamation Authority as a sovereign power. We mobilize the fleets to Xylos. Treason, Malash shrieked. Guards, seize him. But the guards did not move. The captain of the guard was looking at the map of the swarm. He had a broodmate on a border colony, directly in the path of the Red Shadow. The vote is called, the captain said, his voice flat. The law requires it. Malash slumped back, defeated not by a weapon, but by the very rules he claimed to uphold. The voting lights flickered on the podiums. One by one, they turned from the red of rejection to the green of acceptance. It started slowly with the scientists, then the military caste, and finally even the bureaucratic elders. The Ethelgard, for the first time in 1,000 years, chose change. 6 months later, the system of Xylos was no longer a quiet backwater. It was the staging ground for the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen. The sleek, crystalline ships of the Ethelgard flew in formation alongside the rugged, organic-hulled cruisers of the humans. It was a strange sight, the perfection of the aliens contrasting with the wild, adaptive aesthetic of the humans. High Arbiter Kalith stood on the observation deck of the Silent Judgment, docked once again at Novus Eterna. Beside him stood Chancellor Thorn. They were watching the construction of the final phase of the planetary shield, a web of energy that spanned the entire solar system, powered by the stabilized red giant and focused through the heart of Xylos. They are beautiful together, Kalith remarked, looking at the mixed fleet. Contrast creates depth, Thorn agreed. He looked healthier now, the burden of solitary vigilance lifted from his shoulders. Your engineers have improved our emitter efficiency by 40%. We never could have done that alone. And your bioarchitects have shown us how to heal the stress fractures in our hull materials, Kalith said. We were replacing ships. You taught us how to heal them. They watched in silence for a moment, the hum of the city below them a constant reminder of life. The scouts report the vanguard of the swarm will be here in 3 days, Thorn said, his voice dropping. We are ready, Kalith said. The Synod is terrified, of course. Malash has resigned. He spends his days contemplating his navel in a monastery, but the people are awake. You woke them up, Elias. Fear is a potent alarm clock, Thorn noted dryly. It is more than fear, Kalith corrected. It is admiration, they see WH. At you did with this world. They see that nothing is truly dead as long as there is a will to revive it. You have given the Ethelgard something we haven't had in eons. What is that? A future that isn't guaranteed, Kalith said. A challenge. The alarm klaxons began to wail, a mournful sound that echoed across the city and up into the fleet. The proximity sensors had tripped. The swarm was early. It begins, Thorn said, his eyes locking onto the sky. Let them come, Kalith said, checking his sidearm, a weapon he hadn't carried in a century. They expect a dead planet. They expect a divided galaxy. The sky above Xylos Prime began to darken, not with clouds, but with the shadows of 1 billion bioships blotting out the stars. The swarm had arrived, a tide of hunger and death. But as the shadow fell, the surface of Xylos Prime lit up. The organic cities glowed with blinding light. The red giant star flared, controlled and focused. The Ethelgardian fleet formed a glittering wall of diamond-hard shields, and the human fleet surged forward, their ships shifting and changing shape, adapting to the enemy in real time. "Open a channel to the fleet," Thorn commanded. "All ships, human and Ethelgard, this is the line, no further." "For the Concordat," the Ethelgard commanders shouted. "For Earth," the human captains roared. And then, as one, they unleashed the fire. The battle would be long, it would be brutal, many would die. But as Calith stood beside the human chancellor, watching the sky burn with the light of resistance, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Ethelgard had exiled the humans to a dead planet to die. But in doing so, they had planted a seed in the ash. And that seed had grown into a forest of warriors that would not only save the humans, but save their executioners as well. The universe was vast, cold, and indifferent. But on a world of ash and revitalized glory, two species stood back to back, defying the dark. And for the first time in history, the silence of the void was broken not by the scream of the dying, but by the roar of the living. The dead planet did not just thrive, it fought back, and it was winning. As the first wave of the swarm crashed against the shields and disintegrated under the combined fire of the Alliance, Calith looked at Thorn. "You know," the alien said, a strange, clicking laugh escaping him, "I am beginning to see why we exiled you. You are exceptionally dangerous." Thorn grinned, the lights of the battle reflecting in his eyes. "We're only dangerous if you're on the wrong side of the door, Calith. Welcome to the inside." They turned back to the tactical map, two old leaders from different worlds, united by the only law that truly mattered, survival. The dead planet pulsed beneath their feet, alive, awake, and angry. The swarm had come to feed, but it had found only iron and fire. The humans had made it thrive. Now they would make it triumphant. The great red star pulsed, a heartbeat in the dark, signaling to the rest of the galaxy that here, at the edge of the abyss, the light would not go out. Not today, not ever. The end of the exile was just the beginning of the war. But this time, humanity was not alone, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The long night had ended. The dawn of the Alliance had begun. The camera of history pulled back, leaving the two figures silhouetted against the burning sky, the chaos of battle painting a masterpiece of defiance across the heavens, a testament to the indomitable spirit that could turn a grave into a garden and a death sentence into a destiny. The story of Xylos Prime was no longer a tragedy. It was a legend, and legends, as the galaxy was about to learn, never die.